when we announced last week, when we declared the emergency, that we were going to cancel all special events through the second week of April. Now we've extended that another week. I'm not particularly optimistic that at any point soon we'll be picking up the special events. But anybody out there who had a permit, there's information on our website about how to go about handling the cancellation of that. We had our first positive test for a firefighter, and while not unexpected, it came a little bit earlier than we thought, and we've taken we've consulted with the state, and also the fire chief is talking to the workforce. This particular person who tested positive did not exhibit any symptoms in the workplace for 36 hours, so there's a slightly different protocol than if he or she had experienced something. So that information will be shared by the fire chief with the fire department workforce this afternoon. We have had, and I know, Madam Chair, I wanted to thank you specifically. I know everyone on the board's been doing a lot, but we've had some very intensive conversations with our partners at the state, focusing on surge capacity related to Virginia Hospital Center and our medical capabilities. And I wanted to say that Virginia Hospital Center has been a phenomenal partner for us. The testing still goes on the North Quincy Street property across from Washington Liberty. And the hospital, I know, is engaged in a lot of efforts to increase the capacity at the hospital. And I'm optimistic they'll do whatever they can within their means. But we also know that if the illness takes its regular course, as we've seen in some other countries, that they may at some point in the not too distant future be overwhelmed. So we're working with our state and federal partners on adding some capacity in the community. Another item I wanted to mention is that our ART bus system, right now we're down to 4 routes. We've been experiencing about 25% occupancy on our ART buses. It's been steadily going down every day, so that's where we are right now. We have encouraged people. As a matter of fact, the only way to get on the bus will be through the rear door. That makes it a little bit easier for the bus driver and people to maintain 6-foot distance. And also, we are not charging any fares, which is consistent with what the metro system is doing. One other note related to some of our services, we had our Department of Environmental Services was informed by our trash hauler, American Disposal Services, that they would no longer be picking up bulk items. We're exploring what other options we can use, but by bulk items, I mean really large items, washers, dryers, couches, those kinds of things. We continue to have regular trash and recycling pickup. Let's see. We have, and I know you didn't intend this, Madam Chair, but when you were talking about resiliency and innovation at the beginning of the year, we've actually come up with a few ones that really I'm really proud of. We traditionally, when we've had something like this, we stand up an emergency operations center, and we have always focused, at least initially, on a physical location. We have not had to have any physical co-location, even before now, when it was possible. We have done a full virtual operations center, which I think is a presaging something that myself and my colleagues in the region have talked about. When we get to the other end of this, on the other side, we actually have discovered some things that we can do that do not require as much bricks and mortar footprint. And so we're trying to at least look positively on that. The police have encouraged people to file more of their reports online so that we don't have to have in-person conversations. And we, as we mentioned on Saturday, we have the curbside pickup for restaurants and the free short-term parking outside those restaurants. I did want to be really encourage restaurants, because not all restaurants have, according to the regulatory scheme, we have the authority to do to do carry out and use drivers to deliver meals. We'll be back to you, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, I think, this evening. I'm encouraging any restaurant to actually do that. Yeah. And we will figure out the regulatory issues at a later point. Some of the other things we're doing, we are continuing our building inspections. We're doing them all virtually, which essentially means the homeowner takes their iPhone, scans it across whatever the area is that's going to be inspected, and we get a lot of work done that way. I'm not saying that it does everything we have to do, but it's really, I think, a creative way of moving ahead with some of our work. We have a selection of ebooks is going like hotcakes. I may actually be back to you when we talk a little bit about the budget. I know there are some real life, health, safety needs, but one of the things I'm thinking about is perhaps increasing the budget for ebooks as people are home and make an incredible use of our collections. We have a great note went out from Parks today about some at-home activities, including how to cook Play-Doh at home. And then we have a playlist that our libraries director just circulated entitled Dancing with Myself, and it has a number of very exciting selections. She left Eric Carmen off All by Myself from the 1970s, but that's just because she's not a fan of the 1970s excellent music that I grew up to. And I think that really is my final word, at least for right now, on the virus. So if you have any questions on that before I move to my last item, I'm happy to take them.
I'll just say I agree. I think it's a shame leaving off that 1970s music. And on the health safety, I think the ebooks and the dancing, that's mental health, and that's going to be really, really important. I think basically equally important. It's part of the whole health thing. So thank you for doing that. Colleagues, questions? Mr. DeFranti?
Just as I feel like I have to mention, you mentioned the hospital efforts that you've worked on, Madam Chair, and also I know you've been working on that a lot, Mr. Manager. Just a big thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And then I think it's been said in different contexts, but I believe that still there's the daily task force meetings that are happening each day that you're working on, and you have an emergency team. And so I think we've said that in writing, but I always feel like it could be worth mentioning. And then last, with respect to the firefighters, DC had a larger quarantine, and so just thinking of them in addition to our healthcare workers and all of our staff.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you. Mr. Dorsey.
So question, Mr. Manager, I'm mindful that we want to make sure that we communicate messages clearly and make sure that they're well understood. One of the areas in which there's been some confusion is about the order to close playgrounds and trails. And just to be clear, what we mean by that is simply that trails and playgrounds are not immune from our social distancing norms that we are trying to impose. It's not that they are in fact closed to individuals who are not in groups who are practicing social distancing. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, I would actually encourage people if, they want to go for a walk with their dog on the trail, that's perfectly advisable and good. We should not, people should not be congregating in groups in the parks. But if you go and you look at the release we sent out, we were encouraging a lot of self-reflective walks and self-reflective gardening, and people should still get outside and use our trails. We have any parks where there's a space that we had a lock where we could lock it, we've done that, but there are still a lot of spaces available for people to roam about, and I think that's still important. And we're going to constantly take a look at that and examine the status of that, because that was one of the hardest things I think we've done so far, because we've talked about reaching the right balance, and I think that right now where we're going, I will say in hindsight, I know that we will have made some bad decisions. This may end up being one of them, but we'll just have to see. We're going to be flexible about this taking a look at it every week to see where we are.